The sound that kept my house feeling like home wasn't music. It was the soft click of Titan's claws moving across my hardwood floor. Click, click, click. 75 pounds of Belgian Malinois, making his morning patrol from the kitchen to the front window and back again. I was standing at the counter, slicing an apple while he made his rounds. The coffee maker had just finished brewing. A logistics report sat open on my laptop. The digital clock on my microwave read 6:18. Nothing exciting was happening. That was exactly how I liked it. For 12 years, my life had been built around alarms, schedules, deployment orders, and situations that could go bad in a matter of seconds. These days, my biggest emergency was usually a delayed freight shipment from Ohio or a warehouse manager forgetting to update inventory numbers. I preferred it that way. Titan stopped beside me and rested his head against my hip. I scratched behind his ears. "Inspection complete?" I asked. His tail thumped once against the cabinet. "Good enough. Most people saw a dog." I saw the partner who had saved my life, twice. The first time happened outside Kandahar, when Titan alerted on a pressure plate, buried under loose dirt, beside a road that looked perfectly normal. The second time happened 8 months later, when he detected explosives hidden inside what appeared to be an abandoned motorcycle. Those alerts brought every member of our team home alive. You don't forget things like that. You definitely don't forget the partner responsible for it. When Titan retired from service, bringing him home wasn't even a decision. It was a responsibility. The house wasn't fancy. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom and a half. A detached garage that desperately needed repainting. The mortgage statement sitting in my desk drawer still made me smile every month because every dollar attached to that house belonged to me. No inheritance, no trust fund, no rich spouse. Just hazard pay, deployment bonuses, and years of saying no to things I couldn't afford. The dining table had a scratch near the corner from when Titan knocked over a toolbox. The guest room still contained unopened boxes from a move that happened almost 2 years ago. The backyard fence leaned slightly to the left. Perfect. Every inch of the place represented peace. Every inch represented ownership. Most importantly, nobody told me what to do inside it. That lasted until Tuesday. The weather report had been threatening rain all day, but I barely noticed. I was finishing a conference call with a supplier in Pennsylvania when Titan suddenly walked to the front door. His ears lifted, his posture changed. Someone was outside. A few seconds later, my doorbell rang, then rang again, then a third time. The rapid-fire sequence immediately told me it wasn't a delivery driver. Delivery drivers have patience. Family does not. I muted my headset. "Give me 1 minute," I told the meeting. Titan was already standing beside the door when I opened it. My mother stood on the porch holding an expensive leather handbag. My younger sister stood beside her. 4 large suitcases surrounded them like abandoned airport luggage. I stared. They stared back. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, my mother smiled. It wasn't a question smile. It was an announcement smile. "There you are," she said. That was the entire greeting. Not hello, not how are you, just there you are. I looked at the suitcases, then at Simone, then back at the suitcases. "What's going on?" Simone sighed dramatically. "Our apartment building had a plumbing disaster." My mother stepped forward before I could respond. 3 floors were affected. The management company says repairs could take at least 2 weeks. I blinked. Okay, my mother repeated, "Yes." She frowned. I had apparently responded incorrectly. "We'll need somewhere to stay." There it was. Not "can we stay?" Not "would it be possible?" Not even a polite conversation. A decision had already been made. I glanced at the 4 suitcases. The amount of luggage suggested they had packed for a military campaign. Simone adjusted her sunglasses. I had to save my wedding planning binders. Of course she did. Apparently, emergency plumbing situations still leave enough time to rescue color-coded bridal spreadsheets. I stepped aside. Military training teaches you to solve problems first and process feelings later. 2 displaced family members standing in the rain qualified as a problem, so I solved it. "Come in." My mother walked inside immediately. No hesitation, no gratitude, no acknowledgement. Straight into my kitchen like she was conducting a property inspection. Simone followed behind her carrying 2 oversized tote bags. Titan remained beside me, calm and silent. The moment my mother saw him, her expression changed. Not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to notice. I noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Her mouth tightened. The same look she'd worn for years whenever Titan entered a room. As if someone had brought a muddy tractor into a fine restaurant. He's gotten bigger, she said. He's exactly the same size. Really? Really? Titan sat beside my leg. Perfect posture, perfect discipline. More self-control than most humans I knew. My mother set her designer handbag on my kitchen counter. The bag probably cost more than my first used pickup truck. She glanced at Titan again, then at the hardwood floor, then at the couch, then at the hallway. I recognized that look too. Assessment, evaluation, ownership. People who respect your home look around. People who plan to control your home study it. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, my mother was already examining my sanctuary like a hotel manager reviewing a property she intended to renovate. Simone was busy carrying in wedding magazines. Titan leaned against my leg. And standing there in my own kitchen, I realized something important. The storm wasn't outside anymore. It had just carried 4 suitcases through my front door. Have you ever opened your home to family and realized they weren't arriving as guests? They were arriving as owners? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about boundaries, dignity, and the quiet power of standing your ground, make sure you're here every day at 8:30 a.m. ET and 1:30 p.m. ET. Our next story premiere is always waiting, and I'd love to see you there. A different brand of coffee appeared in my kitchen before the week was over. I noticed it on Friday morning. The familiar dark roast I had been buying for almost 3 years was gone from the pantry shelf. In its place sat a decorative tin of some expensive vanilla-flavored blend that looked like it belonged in a gift basket. I stared at it for a second. Then I opened another cabinet. Nothing. My coffee was gone. Not finished. Gone. Titan sat beside the refrigerator watching me search. I already knew who was responsible. Sure enough, my mother walked into the kitchen wearing workout clothes she had never actually worked out in. She smiled. You found the new coffee. I found someone else's coffee. She waved a hand dismissively. The old one tasted burnt. I took a slow breath. That was my coffee. And now this is your coffee. She said it with complete confidence, like she had upgraded my life. Like replacing things I chose for myself was somehow a favor. 3 days. That was how long it took Lydia Croft to start remodeling my existence. The coffee wasn't the first sign. It wasn't even the second. The day before, I had spent 20 minutes searching for my combat boots before finding them in the garage. Not near the garage, inside it. Placed neatly against a wall behind a stack of storage bins. When I asked why, my mother looked genuinely confused by the question. They looked aggressive. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was asking how a pair of boots could intimidate a grown woman. Boots look aggressive now? They don't exactly create a welcoming atmosphere. Those boots had traveled through 2 deployments. They had crossed deserts, airfields, cargo ramps, and military bases scattered across 3 continents. Now apparently they were guilty of poor interior decorating. Titan understood more than people realized. Every morning he followed the same routine: kitchen, front window, back door, living room. Then he settled near my desk while I worked. That routine lasted exactly 4 days before my mother began treating him like an unwanted tenant. The comments started small. He's shedding again. He takes up a lot of space. Does he have to lie right there? The answer was always yes. Because right there usually happened to be wherever I was. Titan wasn't guarding the house. He was monitoring me. Years of training and service had wired him that way. My nervous system wasn't exactly factory standard anymore. Neither was his. We worked around each other's damage. That arrangement had been functioning perfectly until my family arrived. One afternoon, I walked into the living room after finishing a freight scheduling meeting. Titan was lying on his bed near the fireplace. My mother was standing over him holding a lint roller. She wasn't using it on furniture. She was pointing it at him, like she expected him to apologize. Look at this, she announced. She held up a lint-covered sheet. Dogs shouldn't shed this much. Titan didn't even look at her. I was jealous. Mom, he's a Belgian Malinois. He's a vacuum cleaner's worst nightmare. He saved soldiers from explosives. Still sheds. There it was, the difference between us. When I looked at Titan, I saw service, sacrifice, discipline. When my mother looked at him, she saw fur. Meanwhile, Simone had transformed my dining room into wedding planning headquarters. Every surface disappeared beneath bridal magazines, venue brochures, fabric samples, invitation mock-ups, and notebooks. One afternoon, I counted 19 separate magazines spread across my dining table. 19. I know because I was waiting for a spreadsheet to load and had nothing better to do. At least that's what I told myself. Do you like ivory or pearl? Simone asked one evening. I looked at two nearly identical pieces of paper. I genuinely cannot tell the difference. She sighed dramatically. That's because you don't have a wedding mindset. I had a mortgage mindset. Apparently, those were different things. A few days later, I opened my refrigerator and discovered color-coded sticky notes attached to shelves. One section labeled Bridal Shower, IDS. Another labeled Wedding Samples. A third labeled Do Not Touch. The last one happened to be attached to a cheesecake I had purchased myself. I removed the sticky note. Then I ate a slice. Small victories matter. Every day followed the same pattern. I logged into work around 7:00. Reviewed shipping reports, managed freight schedules, answered emails, took Titan for his afternoon run, made dinner, stayed quiet. Military life teaches endurance. You learn how to tolerate discomfort. You learn how to function while exhausted. You learn how to adapt when circumstances become inconvenient. Those skills had kept me alive overseas. The problem was that I had started applying them in the wrong place. One evening, Titan and I returned from a 4-mile run along a trail near the river. The house was unusually quiet. For a moment, I felt relief. Then I stepped inside. The furniture had been rearranged, not dramatically, just enough. A lamp moved, a chair relocated, a side table shifted to another corner. The room looked almost identical, almost. The problem was that it wasn't. I stood there staring. Titan stopped beside me. Even he noticed. My mother appeared from the hallway. What do you think? Think about what? Apparently about the furniture she had reorganized inside a house she didn't own. It flows better now, she explained. I looked around, then at her, then around again. The strange thing was that none of these incidents seemed big enough to fight over. Coffee, boots, furniture, magazines, comments about Titan, tiny things. That's how it worked. Nobody storms into your life and demolishes it all at once. They move one piece at a time, one shelf, one habit, one boundary, one room. Until one day you realize you're living in a place that still has your name on the deed but no longer feels like yours. I told myself I was being patient. I told myself I was being mature. I told myself I was keeping the peace. What I didn't realize was that peace and surrender are not the same thing. And while I was busy enduring, my mother was slowly redesigning the sanctuary I had spent 12 years building. The sound of furniture sliding across hardwood pulled me out of a budget review meeting. I muted my microphone and looked toward the living room. Titan lifted his head from beside my desk. The dragging sound came again. Not loud, just enough to make both of us notice. I finished the call 10 minutes later and walked downstairs. The living room looked wrong immediately. When you've lived alone long enough, you know exactly where everything belongs. You don't measure it. You feel it. My couch had been pushed closer to the fireplace. The armchairs had switched positions. The coffee table sat at an angle that made absolutely no sense. And standing in the middle of all of it was my mother. She held a yellow legal pad and a pen. She looked delighted. That should have worried me more than it did. Oh, good, she said. You're here. I glanced around the room. What happened? She looked genuinely excited. Simone's bridal shower. That wasn't an answer. That was a warning label. My sister emerged from the dining room, carrying fabric swatches. She looked equally excited. Neither of them seemed to notice that they were standing inside my house while discussing plans I knew nothing about. My mother pointed at various parts of the room with her pen. Catering tables along that wall. Point. Gift table near the fireplace. Point. Guest seating here. Point. I waited. Surely the explanation was coming. Instead, she continued. The quartet will perform on the back patio. I blinked. The what? The string quartet. She smiled proudly. Simone deserves something elegant. I looked at my sister. She nodded enthusiastically. Apparently, we had moved beyond bridal showers and entered wedding production territory. How many people are coming? My mother checked her notes. 32 confirmed, 4 Mabes. I thought I had misheard. 32? 36 if everyone accepts. For a second, I honestly wondered if I had accidentally wandered into someone else's house, because nobody had discussed any of this with me. Not one conversation, not one text message, not one question. My mother wasn't asking permission. She was assigning responsibilities. She turned a page on her notepad. You'll need to move your truck from the driveway Sunday morning. I stared at her. You'll also want to clear space in the refrigerator. Another page. The caterers arrive at 11. Another page. The florist comes around 10:30. Then she smiled. The smile people use when they're announcing good news. Isn't this exciting? Titan walked into the room and settled beside me. The moment my mother saw him, her smile faded slightly. Not enough for Simone to notice. Enough for me. I looked around the room again. 30 strangers. Caterers. Musicians. Decorations. Cars filling the driveway. People wandering through my house. People opening doors. People making noise. People everywhere. Titan hated crowds. Not because he was aggressive. Not because he wasn't trained. Quite the opposite. Years of military work made him hyper-aware of unfamiliar activity. Large groups made him alert. Alert wasn't dangerous. Alert was exhausting. The same way crowded places could exhaust me. I kept my voice calm. I don't want 30 people in the house. Silence. My mother blinked, as if I had spoken another language. What? I don't want 30 people here. She laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of laugh people use when they think you're joking. Well, that's where the shower is. I nodded toward Titan. Crowds make him anxious. My mother sighed immediately. There it was. That sigh. That exact sigh. The one she had used my entire life. The sigh that translated into, here we go again. I had heard it when I was 17 and told her I planned to enlist. I had heard it when I refused to leave the army after my first contract. I had heard it when I bought this house instead of moving closer to her. Every major decision I made came with that sigh. As if independence were a personal attack. Oh, Nadine, there it was. The voice too, the patient voice. The one adults use with children who don't understand how the world works. Don't be so dramatic. Titan remained completely still beside me. My jaw tightened. She continued. Just put the dog in the laundry room. I honestly thought I had misheard. The laundry room? For the afternoon. My mother waved her hand casually. Problem solved. Conversation over. A living creature reduced to an inconvenience. A service dog reduced to furniture storage. Simone finally joined in. It's only for a few hours. Only. Funny word. People always use only when they're volunteering someone else's sacrifice. Only move your schedule. Only give up your weekend. Only change your plans. Only lock away your dog. I looked at my sister. He's not a decoration. Nobody responded. Because that wasn't really the issue. The issue was that they didn't see Titan the way I did. To me, he was a retired veteran. A working partner. A living reason several soldiers were still alive. To them, he was a hairy obstacle standing between Simone and her perfect bridal shower photos. My mother closed her notebook. Simone deserves one special day. I almost laughed, not because it was funny. Because Simone had apparently been enjoying one special day every day since arriving. The bridal magazines, the planning sessions, the furniture changes, the endless discussions about centerpieces. My entire house had slowly become a wedding annex. Now they wanted the final piece, control of the event itself, control of the space, control of the rules, control of who belonged in the house, and somehow the only person expected to compromise was me, again. Titan rested his head against my leg, simple, quiet, trusting. My mother glanced at him with visible irritation, then back at me. You owe this family a little hospitality. The sentence hung in the room. Interesting choice of words. Owe. Not share, not offer, not help. Owe. As if the mortgage payments came from a family account. As if the property taxes arrived addressed to all three of us. As if the years I'd spent overseas belonged to some collective committee. I looked around my living room, my rearranged living room, my repurposed living room, my increasingly occupied living room. For the first time, a thought crossed my mind that refused to leave. Nobody was acting like a guest anymore. And the most dangerous part wasn't that they had stopped asking. The most dangerous part was that I had gotten used to it. The first catering van rolled into my driveway before I finished my second cup of coffee. By 10:47, strangers were carrying aluminum warming trays through my front door. By 11:12, someone had filled my kitchen island with flower arrangements. By 11:26, I heard a violin being tuned somewhere on my back patio. Apparently we had skipped right past bridal shower and arrived at small royal wedding. I sat on the hallway floor with Titan beside me. His leash wasn't attached. My hand rested loosely on his collar. Not because I was controlling him, because he was working. People who have never lived with a service dog assume they're constantly being managed. The truth is usually the opposite. Titan wasn't pacing because he wanted to cause trouble. He was pacing because 20 unfamiliar voices had entered his environment within an hour. Doors opened. Doors closed. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor. Metal trays clattered. Someone dropped a serving spoon. Someone laughed loudly near the front entrance. His ears tracked every sound. Mine did too. Old habits don't disappear. They just become quieter. Titan stopped beside me and leaned his shoulder against my leg. I scratched behind his ear. "You're okay." His breathing slowed slightly. The hallway remained one of the few places still untouched by bridal decorations. Every other room seemed to have surrendered. The dining room had become gift storage. The living room had become seating. The backyard looked ready for a magazine photo shoot. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my own floor like a visitor, waiting for permission to enter. The irony wasn't lost on me. A caterer carrying a tray passed through the hallway. He smiled politely. "Beautiful dog." "Thanks." Titan's tail moved once. The man continued toward the kitchen. Simple interaction, normal interaction. Then my mother appeared. She emerged from the kitchen carrying a clipboard. Of course she had a clipboard. At this point, I suspected she would bring a clipboard to her own parole hearing. She wore a lavender suit that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Every hair sat perfectly in place. Every detail looked calculated. She was dressed like the CEO of a company that specialized in judging people. The moment she saw Titan, her expression changed. Not annoyance, not frustration, disgust, pure and immediate. Her eyes narrowed. Her lips tightened. The transformation happened so quickly it was almost impressive. "I told you to put that animal in the laundry room." The words came out as a sharp whisper. She didn't want the caterers hearing. Public image mattered, always. I looked up from where I sat. "Titan doesn't get locked in dark rooms, Mom." Her jaw tightened. "He stays by my side." For a second, neither of us moved. The noise from the party preparations continued around us. Footsteps. Dishes. Conversations. Music equipment being unloaded outside. The world kept moving. But the hallway suddenly felt very small. My mother's face began turning red. Not dramatically. Just enough. The warning signs I had learned to recognize decades ago. I had seen that same expression when I refused to quit the army after basic training. I had seen it when I turned down a job offer she wanted me to take. I had seen it whenever reality failed to cooperate with her plans. Lydia Croft didn't negotiate. She applied pressure. Then more pressure. Then more pressure. Eventually, most people surrendered because arguing took too much energy. That strategy had worked for her entire life. She took a step closer. "You are being unbelievably selfish today." Interesting accusation. Bridal shower occupied my house. My furniture had been rearranged. My kitchen had been taken over. My driveway was full. My weekend had disappeared. Yet somehow I was the selfish one. Titan remained calm, more calm than either of us. I already explained this. I kept my voice even. "He's staying with me." My mother glanced toward the kitchen, then toward the front door. Guests would begin arriving soon. She was running out of time, and people like my mother hate running out of time. Because deadlines remove opportunities for manipulation, the pressure increased. Her voice lowered further. "I cannot host a civilized event with that beast wandering around." Beast. Not dog, not Titan, not service animal, not retired military working dog. Beast. Funny how language reveals what people really think. I looked at her, then at Titan, then back at her. The contrast was remarkable. One had spent years protecting human lives. The other was angry because wedding guests might see dog hair. My mother pointed at him. Her finger actually trembled. Not from fear, from outrage. The same outrage people experience when authority stops working. "You have no choice, Nadine." There it was. The sentence, the foundation of every argument she had ever started. You have no choice. As if adulthood were optional. As if property ownership came with parental override privileges. As if I were still 17 years old. I didn't answer. That bothered her even more. People who control conversations need participation. Silence forces them to continue talking. And eventually, they say exactly what they mean. Which is precisely what happened. She straightened her shoulders, took a breath, then delivered the sentence that changed everything. "Choose." Salzway seemed to go quiet. Not literally. The noise remained. I just stopped hearing it. My mother's eyes locked onto mine. "It's him or me." There it was. The final form of the argument. Not compromise, not discussion. Elimination. "One thing must go. One thing must remain," she continued. "If that dog stays inside this house today, I am packing my bags." The words landed between us. Firm, confident, absolute. My mother believed in ultimatums the way some people believe in religion. She expected them to work. They always had before. Give people enough fear, and they'll choose comfort. Give people enough guilt, and they'll choose surrender. Give people enough family pressure, and they'll choose obedience. The problem was that she had misunderstood something fundamental. The question standing in front of me wasn't really about Titan. It wasn't about the bridal shower. It wasn't about dog hair, or guests, or appearances. The real question was much simpler. How much of myself was I still willing to trade in exchange for keeping the peace? My mother waited, completely certain she already knew the answer. And for the first time all day, I realized she might be the only person in the house who didn't. Titan shifted his weight against my leg as I stood up. My mother remained exactly where she was, confident, certain, victorious. She had delivered the ultimatum, and now she was waiting for reality to cooperate. Most people expect a fight after words like that. A raised voice, an emotional speech. Maybe a few tears. Television has convinced people that every family conflict needs a dramatic soundtrack. Real life is usually quieter, especially when someone finally understands what they're looking at. I looked directly at my mother, not at the clipboard, not at the lavender suit, not at the finger she had pointed at my dog, at her. For years, I had spent enormous amounts of energy trying to interpret her behavior in the most generous way possible. Maybe she means well, maybe she's stressed, maybe she's worried, maybe she's just being protective. Maybe. The human mind can build an impressive number of excuses when it wants to preserve a relationship. But standing in that hallway, something changed. Not suddenly, more like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. My mother had just asked me to lock away the creature that had protected me through 2 combat deployments. Not because Titan had done anything wrong, not because anyone was in danger, not because there was a legitimate problem. She wanted him removed because his existence interfered with the image she wanted to present. A prettier party, a cleaner background, better photographs. That was the calculation. And for the first time, I stopped evaluating the situation through the lens of family. I evaluated it the way I would have evaluated any situation overseas. Objective, practical, without emotion clouding the facts. Fact 1, Titan had done nothing wrong. Fact 2, the house belonged to me. Fact 3, my mother believed she had authority she did not possess. Fact 4, she expected me to surrender because I always had before. Simple, clear, undeniable. The strangest part was that I wasn't angry. Anger requires surprise. Nothing about this situation surprised me anymore. I was simply finished discovering new ways to excuse it. My mother crossed her arms, waiting, still confident, still certain. I nodded once. Understood, Mom, that was it. 2 words, no speech, no argument, no explanation. For the first time all day, uncertainty flickered across her face, only for a second. Then it disappeared, because she interpreted my response exactly the way she wanted to. Compliance, submission, victory, the familiar formula. I saw her shoulders relax. I saw the tension leave her jaw, and then I heard it. A small, satisfied sigh. The sound wasn't loud, but it told me everything. She thought she had won. The battle was over. The problem was solved. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Titan stood when I started walking. My mother stepped aside. The hallway suddenly seemed wider. Behind me, I heard her call toward the kitchen. Everything's fine. Her voice sounded cheerful again, professional, polished. The crisis had passed, at least from her perspective. I climbed the stairs without hurrying. 1 step, then another. Titan followed beside. His nails clicked softly against the wood. The familiar sound settled something inside me. At the top of the stairs, I paused briefly. Down below, the party preparations continued. Someone laughed. A door opened. Boxes moved across the floor. The string quartet had started rehearsing outside. A violin drifted through the house. It was almost funny. Thousands of dollars worth of preparation. Weeks of planning, dozens of guests. And nobody realized the event was already over. They just hadn't received the update yet. Titan walked ahead of me toward my bedroom. I followed. The room was exactly the way I had left it. One of the few places still untouched. My laptop sat on the dresser. A stack of logistics reports remained on the desk. The framed photo of my old K9 unit rested on the bookshelf. Normal, stable, mine. Titan settled onto the rug, watching, waiting. He trusted me completely. That responsibility carried weight. More weight than family expectations. More weight than guilt. More weight than appearances. Trust always does. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, not because I needed to think. The decision had already been made. I simply needed to acknowledge it. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Years earlier, during a deployment briefing, a senior officer had said something that stayed with me. Indecision creates more problems than difficult decisions. At the time, he was discussing operational planning. But the principle applied everywhere. The longer you delay an unavoidable decision, the more damage accumulates. Downstairs, my mother believed she had forced a choice. What she didn't understand was that the choice had actually happened weeks ago. The moment she started treating my home like her property. The moment she started treating Titan like an inconvenience. The moment she decided her comfort mattered more than my boundaries. She simply hadn't noticed it. People rarely notice the exact moment they lose access to someone. They only notice when the door closes. A burst of laughter drifted from up downstairs. Guests were arriving. The shower was beginning. My mother was probably greeting people right now, smiling, shaking hands, accepting compliments, playing hostess in the house she did not own. For years, I had mistaken endurance for strength. I endured criticism. I endured manipulation. I endured guilt. I endured disrespect. Because endurance had always served me well. But endurance is a tool, not a lifestyle. Eventually, every soldier learns the difference between holding a position and abandoning one. I looked around the room, then toward the hallway, then toward the guest rooms across from mine. The rooms my mother and sister had occupied for nearly 3 weeks. Something settled inside me with absolute clarity. No anger, no panic, no revenge, just clarity. The kind that arrives when a decision finally becomes obvious. I stood up. Titan rose immediately, ready to follow, ready for whatever came next. Downstairs, my mother was preparing to host the perfect bridal shower. Upstairs, I was preparing something else entirely. And the only person in the house who understood that a line had finally been crossed was the retired military dog quietly walking beside me. The guest room door swung open without resistance. Titan followed me into the hallway but stopped outside the room. He sat down quietly, watching. The sounds of the bridal shower drifted upward through the floorboards. Laughter, conversations, the occasional clink of glass. Someone was already playing music on the patio. The party had begun. I stepped into the room. For nearly 3 weeks, my mother had occupied this space as if she had signed the mortgage paperwork herself. The bed was unmade. Several shopping bags sat in the corner. A lavender cardigan hung over the desk chair. 3 necklaces rested on the dresser beside an open jewelry case. Normal things, temporary things, things belonging to people who were about to leave. I walked to the closet. My mother's large Samsonite suitcase stood against the back wall. Dark blue, hard shell. The same suitcase she brought on every vacation. The same suitcase she once insisted could survive being run over by a car. I pulled it out, set it on the bed, pressed the release button, click. The lid opened, no speeches, no anger, no dramatic declarations, just a suitcase. Funny how life sometimes comes down to ordinary objects. Downstairs, someone laughed loudly enough to echo through the ceiling. I ignored it. Then I opened the dresser. Top drawer, sweaters, pastel colors, pink, cream, light blue. Everything arranged exactly the way my mother liked it. I picked up the first sweater, folded one sleeve inward, then the other. Bottom up, fabric place inside suitcase. Repeat, simple, precise, efficient. Military training teaches you something interesting. The more emotional a situation becomes, the more valuable routine becomes. Routine prevents mistakes. Routine prevents hesitation. Routine gives your hand something useful to do while your mind processes reality. Sweater, fold, smooth, pack. Another sweater, fold, smooth, pack. Nothing rushed, nothing thrown, nothing damaged. I wasn't evicting strangers. I was helping family honor a promise. That distinction mattered. The second drawer contained slacks. Several holes still carried dry cleaning tags. I removed the tags carefully, folded each pair, stacked them neatly, placed them inside the suitcase. No wrinkles, no creases, no disrespect. The room remained remarkably quiet despite the celebration downstairs. A violin drifted faintly through the floor. Someone applauded. Apparently a toast had happened. Good for them. I moved to the bathroom. My mother's cosmetics occupied almost half the counter. Small bottles, travel containers, makeup, brushes, lotions, supplies to survive a minor natural disaster. I opened her travel case, placed everything inside. One item at a time, zipped the compartments, closed the bag, set it beside the suitcase. The entire process felt strangely peaceful, not satisfying, not joyful, just clear, like finally cleaning out a storage unit you've been meaning to empty for years. When you stop arguing with reality, everything becomes easier. A loud burst of laughter came from downstairs. Then another. The bridal shower was working perfectly. which made the situation even funnier. 30 people were currently celebrating in a house whose owner had quietly reached the end of her patience. None of them knew it. My mother certainly didn't. She was probably greeting guests, accepting compliments, explaining floral arrangements, completely unaware that her departure was being organized one folded sweater at a time. I finished packing her suitcase, then zipped it shut. The sound felt final, not aggressive. Final, one boundary closed, one decision completed. I set the suitcase beside the bed, then crossed the hall to the second guest room. Simone's room looked different, less organized, more chaotic. Wedding planning materials covered nearly every available surface: fabric samples, venue brochures, invitation proofs. A notebook labeled Final Dates sat open on the desk. I glanced at the title and almost laughed. Apparently, final details were occurring everywhere today. Her duffel bag rested beside the closet. I opened it, then started packing blouses, jeans, shoes, cosmetics, phone chargers, hair products. Everything carefully arranged, everything treated with respect. Because this wasn't revenge. Revenge damages things. This was administration. The same energy required to close an account, cancel a subscription, change a lock. Some decisions become necessary long before they become visible. I found one of her bridal binders beneath a stack of magazines. The cover read, Simone's Perfect Day. I stared at it for a moment. Interesting title. Not our family celebration. Not a special day. Not a joyful gathering. Her perfect day. That word explained more than she probably realized. Perfect days usually require somebody else to absorb the inconvenience. Somebody else moves the furniture. Somebody else gives up their weekend. Somebody else changes their plans. Somebody else locks away the dog. I placed the binder neatly on top of her packed belongings. No reason for her to lose it. The future bride would need it. The duffel bag filled quickly. I zipped it closed. Another final sound. Another completed task. By now, nearly 40 minutes had passed. Downstairs, the party continued. A catering cart rolled across hardwood. People talked. Music played. Life moved forward. And upstairs, something equally important was happening. Not dramatic, not loud, important. For most of my life, I had confused tolerance with kindness. I tolerated criticism. I tolerated disrespect. I tolerated manipulation. I tolerated demands disguised as family obligations. Because saying no felt selfish. Because setting boundaries felt rude. Because keeping the peace seemed easier. The problem with that strategy is that people eventually mistake your tolerance for permission. They stop appreciating the sacrifice. They start expecting it. I lifted Simone's packed duffel bag from the floor, then looked around both guest rooms, closets empty, dressers empty, bathroom clear, everything packed, everything ready, nothing damaged, nothing missing, nothing left to debate. Titan stood as I stepped into the hallway. He looked at the bags, then at me, then back at the bag's smart dog. He understood movement, transition, departure. I rested my hand briefly on his head. The sounds from downstairs continued without interruption. My mother still believed she had won an argument. The guests still believed they were attending a bridal shower. Simone still believed this house existed to support her plans. Only one person in the building understood that the situation had already changed. I reached for the handle of the Samsonite suitcase. And this time, I didn't feel like I was packing luggage. I felt like I was finally putting away 34 years of unfinished business. The Samsonite suitcase felt heavier on the stairs than it had upstairs. Not because of the clothes, because of what it represented. I carried my mother's suitcase in one hand and Simone's duffel bag in the other. Titan walked beside me, calm, steady, focused. Halfway down the staircase, I heard the front door open. More guests. The bridal shower was reaching full strength. Perfect timing. I continued down without rushing. Every step felt deliberate. The staircase creaked softly beneath my boots. One step, then another. The sounds from the party grew louder. Conversation. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, the faint sound of a violin quartet playing somewhere outside. Nobody knew what was about to happen, especially my mother. As I reached the bottom step, I saw the foyer. 3 women stood near the entrance holding wrapped gifts. One carried a decorative gift bag with silver ribbon. Another balanced a flower arrangement in her arms. The third was still removing her sunglasses. All of them wore the same expression: polite anticipation. The expression people wear when they arrive at a celebration. My mother stood directly in front of them. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect hostess. The clipboard had disappeared. The performance had begun. She was greeting guests with the confidence of someone completely in control of her environment. Then she heard my footsteps. She turned around. I saw the expectation immediately. She thought I was coming downstairs to apologize. Maybe she expected me to say she was right. Maybe she expected me to announce that Titan had been locked away. Maybe she expected another surrender. Whatever version of reality she had prepared for, it wasn't this one. Her eyes dropped to the suitcase, then the duffel bag, then back to my face. The smile disappeared, not gradually, instantly. Like someone flipping off a light switch. For a moment she simply stared. The expression was remarkable. Confusion first. Then disbelief. Then the slow realization that something was very wrong. The guests noticed immediately. Conversations nearby started fading. Not completely, just enough. Human beings are excellent at detecting unexpected tension, especially at parties. My mother finally spoke. Nadine, only my name else. I continued walking, straight past her. The foyer suddenly felt very quiet. I wasn't moving fast, I wasn't making a scene that somehow made everything more noticeable. One guest stepped aside automatically to let me pass. Another lowered her gift bag. Someone near the living room stopped talking mid-sentence. My mother turned to follow me. Nadine, what are you doing? Still calm, still controlled. But now there was uncertainty underneath. The front door remained open. Sunlight stretched across the porch. I stepped outside, set the Samsonite suitcase beside the welcome mat, then placed Simone's duffel bag next to it, neatly, carefully. Like luggage waiting for pickup at a hotel. Nothing thrown, nothing slammed, nothing dramatic. That was the part people remembered later. Not the argument, not the words, the calmness. I turned around. My mother stood just inside the doorway, frozen. The guests behind her formed a silent audience. Nobody had planned for entertainment at the bridal shower, yet somehow they had received it. My mother's face had become almost colorless. For perhaps the first time in her life, she genuinely did not know what to say. Because every script she normally used required one thing: my cooperation. Without that, she had nothing. I looked directly at her, the same way I had in the hallway earlier. The difference was that now she finally understood something important. The ultimatum had been accepted. Just not in the direction she expected. Several seconds passed. Long enough for everyone watching to become uncomfortable. Long enough for reality to settle into the room. Then I spoke, calmly, clearly. Loud enough for everyone near the entrance to hear. You said if Titan stayed, you were packing your bags. Absolute silence. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. I continued. I didn't want you to strain your back, Mom. A few people blinked. One woman looked down at the suitcase. Then back at my mother. The pieces were beginning to connect. I nodded toward the luggage. I packed them for you personally. Another pause. Then I delivered Rufani, the final sentence. The dog stays. Silence, complete silence. Not even the violin from the patio seemed loud enough to break it. My mother stared at me. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. The problem wasn't that she lacked words. The problem was that none of her usual words worked anymore. She couldn't accuse me of being emotional. I wasn't. She couldn't accuse me of yelling. I hadn't. She couldn't accuse me of embarrassing her. She had publicly issued the ultimatum herself. I had simply respected it. That's what made it devastating. I had obeyed her instructions exactly. The guests understood that, which meant my mother understood it too. A woman standing near the door shifted awkwardly. Another suddenly became very interested in her shoes. Nobody wanted to be involved. But nobody could look away. Simone appeared from the dining room at exactly the wrong moment. What happened? She stopped when she saw the luggage, then the porch, then my mother, then me. The confusion lasted roughly 3 seconds. After that came outrage. Are you serious? I didn't answer because there was nothing left to explain. Everything important had already been said. Simone looked at my mother. My mother looked at the luggage. Neither of them seemed capable of processing what was happening. For years, every conflict in our family had followed the same pattern. Pressure. Guilt, demand, compliance. Today the pattern broke and neither of them knew what to do next. My mother finally found her voice. You can't be serious. I nodded. I am. Another silence. The kind that settles over a room when everyone realizes a line has been crossed and cannot be uncrossed. Behind me, Titan stepped onto the porch. He sat down beside my leg. Quiet, disciplined, watching. The retired military dog, who had somehow become the center of an entire family's collapse. My mother looked at him, then at me, then at the bags. And for the first time since arriving at my house 3 weeks earlier, she looked like a guest. Not an owner, not a director, not an authority figure, just a woman standing in someone else's doorway after finally hearing the word no. Nobody moved. For several seconds, the entire bridal shower seemed to stop breathing. My mother stood in the doorway staring at the luggage. The guests stared at my mother. Simone stared at everyone, and I stood beside Titan, waiting. Not for an apology, not for understanding, just for a decision. The strange thing about ultimatums is that people love giving them. They just hate living with the results. My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I had seen her speechless before, but never like this. Usually she could find a way to regain control of a conversation, a guilt trip, a criticism, a reminder of everything she had supposedly sacrificed. Somehow she always found a route back into the driver's seat. Today there wasn't one, because I hadn't argued. I hadn't insulted her. I hadn't thrown her belongings onto the lawn. I hadn't raised my voice. I had simply accepted her terms. The guests understood that, which meant she understood it too. A woman near the entrance shifted awkwardly and adjusted the ribbon on her gift bag. Another quietly stepped backward. Nobody looked eager to volunteer for Team Lydia. That was the real problem. My mother had always relied on an audience. Control works best when other people help enforce it. Today the audience wasn't cooperating. Simone finally broke the silence. "What is wrong with you?" The tears arrived almost instantly. Impressive, honestly. If crying were an Olympic event, my sister would have qualified years ago. She looked at the luggage, then at me, then back at the luggage. "My bridal shower is happening right now." I nodded. "Looks like it." She stared. Apparently that wasn't the reaction she expected. "What am I supposed to tell everyone?" I glanced toward the guests. Most of them were suddenly very interested in avoiding eye contact. One woman had quietly retreated halfway down the porch steps. Smart woman. I think they're already figuring it out. That didn't help. Simone made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. My mother finally found enough words to speak. "You are humiliating us." The statement hung in the air. I considered it carefully. Then I answered honestly, "No, Mom." That surprised her, probably because I rarely corrected her. "You gave me a choice." I pointed toward Titan. "He stays." Then toward the luggage. "You said you'd leave." Simple, factual, impossible to argue with. Her face tightened. The truth can be frustrating when it arrives in your own voice. For years, my mother had built her authority on a simple assumption. Everyone else would eventually bend, children bend, relatives bend, friends bend, people get tired. People want peace, people compromise. But authority built entirely on other people's surrender collapses the moment someone decides not to surrender anymore. My mother looked around, searching, not for an answer, for support. She found none. The guests weren't hostile. They weren't judging. But they weren't helping either, because from the outside, the situation looked remarkably straightforward. A woman had demanded that the homeowner choose between her service dog and her guests. The homeowner had chosen the dog. Not exactly a difficult moral puzzle. The silence stretched. Then my mother did something I hadn't expected. She grabbed the handle of the Samsonite suitcase. No speech, no final warning, no dramatic exit line, just the suitcase. Maybe she finally understood there was nothing left to negotiate. Maybe she realized every additional minute would make the situation worse. Either way, she picked up her luggage. The motion felt strangely ordinary, after all the pressure, after all the manipulation, after all the tension. The ending began with a suitcase rolling across a porch. Simone stared in disbelief. "Mom," my mother didn't answer. She walked down the steps, straight toward her car. The guests immediately created space for her, not out of fear, out of awkwardness. Nobody knows exactly how to behave when a family power structure collapses in public. Simone looked at me one last time, waiting. Still hoping I would stop this, still believing I would rescue everyone from the consequences of their own choices. I didn't. Eventually, she grabbed the duffel bag, then followed my mother. The bridal shower guests slowly dispersed. Some left immediately. Others offered uncomfortable excuses. One woman quietly placed her gift bag back in her car and drove away without ever entering the house. Within 20 minutes, the driveway looked almost empty. The caterers packed their equipment. The musicians left. The decorations remained, but the energy was gone. A celebration built on entitlement rarely survives contact with boundaries. The final vehicle disappeared around the corner shortly after 3 o'clock. And then, for the first time in weeks, the house became quiet, real quiet. not waiting for the next demand. Quiet. My quiet. I stepped back inside. Titan followed. The front door closed behind us. Click. The sound echoed through the foyer, a simple sound. Yet somehow it felt important, like the ending of a very long conversation. I locked the door, then stood there for a moment, waiting, checking myself, looking for guilt, looking for regret, looking for that familiar pressure to run after them and apologize. Nothing came, because guilt usually appears when you've done something wrong. And I hadn't. I walked into the living room. The furniture still sat in my mother's ridiculous party arrangement. The gift table remained near the fireplace. Several unused floral centerpieces occupied the coffee table. I would clean it later. Not today. Today I was done working. I sat down on the floor. Titan immediately crossed the room. No hesitation, no command, just instinct. He lowered himself beside me and rested his head on my knee. Heavy, warm, familiar. The same dog who had stood beside me in deserts, cargo planes, military bases, and now apparently family disputes. I scratched behind his ears, his eyes closed. Outside, a light breeze moved through the trees. Inside, the house felt like mine again. People spend a lot of time talking about loyalty. Most of them misunderstand it. Loyalty isn't obedience. It isn't surrender. It isn't sacrificing yourself every time someone demands it. Real loyalty moves both directions. It respects, it protects, it gives as much as it takes. Family isn't defined by shared DNA. Family isn't determined by who can make the biggest demands. Family is built by the people who stand beside you when standing beside you costs them something. I looked down at Titan. He had done that for me for years, without conditions, without ultimatums, without asking me to become someone else for his comfort. And maybe that was the lesson hidden inside everything that happened. Anyone who asks you to throw away your lifeline so they can feel more comfortable has already made their choice. They're the one who packed their bags. Sometimes all that's left is finding the courage to carry them to the door. The house felt different the next morning, not because anything had changed physically. The furniture was still in the wrong places. There were still floral arrangements sitting on tables where they didn't belong. A forgotten ribbon was still hanging from a dining room chair, but the pressure was gone. That's what I noticed first, the pressure. For weeks, every time I walked into my own kitchen, there had been an invisible weight sitting on my shoulders. Every conversation felt like it might turn into a negotiation. Every decision felt like it needed approval from people who didn't pay the mortgage. Now the house was quiet again. Titan was stretched out near the living room window, the same spot he had claimed years ago. Sunlight hit the floor beside him. For the first time in weeks, he looked completely relaxed. Honestly, so did I. I spent most of that Sunday evening cleaning up the remains of the bridal shower that never happened. I folded tablecloths, moved chairs, packed decorations into boxes. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary work. The kind of work that gives your brain time to think. And the more I thought about everything that had happened, the more I realized something uncomfortable. The biggest mistake wasn't what my mother did. The biggest mistake was how long I allowed it. That realization took a while to accept. It's easy to point at difficult people and identify their behavior. It's harder to look at yourself and ask why you tolerated it. For years, I told myself I was being patient. Patient daughter, patient sister, patient family member. Patience sounds noble. People praise patience. They put it on inspirational posters. They teach it in churches. They talk about it like it's always a virtue. But here's something nobody told me. Patience stops being a virtue when it becomes permission. That's the part I wish I had understood sooner. People who need control rarely walk into your life and demand everything on day one. If they did, nobody would tolerate them. Instead, they start small, very small enough that saying no feels ridiculous. It's just a chair. It's just a comment. It's just a favor. It's just one weekend. It's just one compromise. It's just one room. It's just one dog. Every request sounds reasonable by itself. That's why it works. You're not reacting to one thing. You're reacting to 50 small things stacked on top of each other. By the time you realize what's happening, you've gotten used to surrendering pieces of your life. I think that's why so many good people get trapped in unhealthy relationships. Not because they're weak. Not because they're naive. Because they're decent. Decent people naturally try to cooperate. They naturally try to keep peace. They naturally assume other people are operating in good faith. Unfortunately, not everyone is. Some people interpret kindness as weakness. Some people interpret flexibility as surrender. Some people interpret patience as an invitation. Looking back, my mother never actually wanted compromise. Compromise requires two people adjusting. She wanted compliance. There's a difference, a big difference. Compromise sounds like, what works for both of us? Compliance sounds like, why aren't you doing what I want? Those are not the same conversation. And once I started seeing that difference, a lot of things from my life suddenly made sense. Not just with my mother, with coworkers, with old friends, with people I had known for years. The pattern was always the same. The people who truly cared about me respected boundaries when they were explained. The people who wanted control got angry when boundaries appeared. That distinction changed how I view relationships. I think a lot of viewers need to hear that. Because somewhere out there, someone is watching this story while thinking about their own situation. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a boss. Maybe it's someone who constantly asks for more while giving very little in return. If that's you, I want you to pay attention to something. Ask yourself a simple question. When conflict happens, are both people expected to adjust? Or are you always the one making sacrifices? Because that's usually where the answer hides. Healthy relationships create balance. Unhealthy relationships create obligations. One leaves you feeling respected. The other leaves you feeling exhausted. And here's the part that surprised me the most. The day my mother left wasn't the day I lost a relationship. The relationship had already been damaged long before that. The only thing that changed was that I finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Sometimes, people accuse you of changing when you establish boundaries. In reality, you're often just becoming visible. You're showing people where the line actually is. And some people don't like discovering that line exists. Titan eventually walked over and rested his head on my knee while I was thinking about all this. The same thing he had done 1,000 times before. Simple, quiet, consistent. That consistency taught me something too. The healthiest relationships in life usually aren't complicated. You don't spend every day proving your worth. You don't spend every day negotiating your value. You don't spend every day defending your right to exist. Respect becomes normal. Trust becomes normal. Peace becomes normal. And once you've experienced that, it's hard to go back. If there's one lesson I carried away from everything that happened, it's this. Love should never require you to disappear. The moment someone consistently asks you to become smaller, quieter, weaker, or less important so they can feel comfortable, you're no longer being loved, you're being managed. And those are two very different things. A few days after everything happened, I found myself standing in the coffee aisle of a grocery store. That probably sounds like a strange place to think about life. But that's where it happened. I was reaching for the same dark roast I had been buying for years when I remembered the morning my mother replaced it with the coffee she preferred. At the time, it seemed like such a small thing, almost too small to matter. That's the trap. Most boundary violations don't arrive looking important. They arrive disguised as harmless preferences. A different coffee, a different chair arrangement, a different schedule, a different plan. Each one seems too insignificant to challenge, so you let it go. Then you let the next one go, then the one after that. Eventually, you're standing in your own life, wondering why it no longer feels like yours. I wish somebody had explained boundaries to me when I was 24 instead of 34. Back then, I misunderstood them completely. I thought boundaries were confrontational. I thought boundaries created conflict. I thought boundaries were something selfish people used to avoid helping others. I couldn't have been more wrong. A boundary isn't a punishment. A boundary isn't revenge. A boundary isn't telling someone you don't care about them. A boundary is simply information. That's all it is. A boundary tells another person where your responsibility ends and theirs begins. That's it. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel. The problem is that many of us don't learn that growing up. Especially if you come from a family where saying no was treated like rebellion. In some families, obedience becomes the highest virtue. Not honesty, not responsibility, not mutual respect. Obedience. The good child is the child who agrees. The good child is the child who sacrifices. The good child is the child who never makes anyone uncomfortable. I spent a long time trying to be that child. Long after I became an adult. Long after I joined the army. Long after I bought my own house. The strange thing about people-pleasing is that it doesn't actually create peace. It creates delayed conflict. That's all. You postpone problems instead of solving them. You absorb frustration instead of addressing it. You tell yourself you're being mature when you're really just avoiding a difficult conversation. Eventually, the bill comes due. Mine arrived with a bridal shower. Maybe yours looks different. Maybe it's a family member who constantly borrows money and never pays it back. Maybe it's a friend who only calls when they need something. Maybe it's a coworker who keeps dumping their responsibilities onto your desk. Different situations. Same principle. The boundary you avoid today becomes the resentment you carry tomorrow. That's a lesson I learned later than I should have. One thing I've noticed is that many people are terrified of disappointing others. I understand that fear. Nobody enjoys conflict. Nobody enjoys seeing disappointment on someone's face. Nobody enjoys being called selfish. But here's something worth considering. Disappointment is not harm. Those are two different things. Someone being unhappy with your boundary does not automatically mean your boundary is wrong. That realization changed a lot for me. When my mother demanded that Titan be locked away, I wasn't choosing between kindness and cruelty. I was choosing between self-respect and surrender. Those are not the same thing. The reason that moment became so important wasn't because I finally stood up to my mother. It was because I finally stopped negotiating against myself. Think about how often people do that. They know what they need. They know what feels wrong. They know what line is being crossed. Yet they immediately start arguing with themselves. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe I should just let it go. Maybe one more time. One more time becomes 10 years surprisingly fast. One thing I tell people now is very simple. If you need a boundary, state it clearly. Don't hide it. Don't disguise it. Don't expect people to read your mind. Say it. Then stay calm. That's the part many people miss. You don't need a speech. You don't need a courtroom presentation. You don't need 15 supporting documents. You simply state the boundary. Then allow the other person to decide what they want to do with that information. Their reaction teaches you everything. The people who respect you may not love the boundary, but they'll respect it. The people who need control will often become angry, not because the boundary is unreasonable, because the boundary limits their access. Those are very different things. Looking back, I didn't force my mother to leave. I didn't throw her out. I didn't create the ultimatum. She did. All I did was refuse to abandon something important to me. That distinction matters. A lot of viewers need to hear that. Because there are people watching this right now who are carrying responsibility for conflicts they didn't create. Someone else crossed the line. Someone else made the demand. Someone else refused compromise. Yet somehow they're blaming themselves. I've done that down too. Most of us have. The truth is much simpler. You are not responsible for managing another adult's emotions. You are responsible for managing your own behavior. Those are not the same job. And if there's one thing I hope people take from my story, it's this. The right boundary may cost you a relationship that was already unhealthy, but it can also save your relationship with yourself. And that's usually worth protecting. A few months later, I was sitting in the exact same spot where this story began. Same living room, same house, same hardwood floors, and the same 75-pound Belgian Malinois resting his head on my knee. Some things had changed, some things hadn't. The furniture was back where it belonged. The floral arrangements were long gone. The bridal shower existed only as an awkward family memory that nobody seemed eager to discuss. The silence had returned. Not the uncomfortable silence that follows an argument. The good kind. The kind you don't notice until it's missing. Titan let out a slow breath and settled deeper onto the floor. I scratched behind his ears. A habit I probably perform 100 times a week without thinking about it. Funny how the smallest routines become the strongest parts of your life. Over the months that followed, a lot of people asked me the same question. Some asked directly. Others found more creative ways to get there. But the question was always the same. Do you regret it? The honest answer is no. Not because everything became perfect. Not because every relationship magically healed. And certainly not because I enjoyed what happened. I don't enjoy conflict. Most reasonable people don't. But there is a difference between enjoying conflict and accepting reality. I accepted reality. The reality was that I had spent years trying to earn respect from people who believed access to me was their birthright. That's an exhausting way to live. One lesson I wish more people understood is that family and access are not the same thing. Some people treat those words like they mean exactly the same thing. They don't. Being related to someone gives them a connection to you. It does not give them ownership of you. It doesn't give them unlimited access to your time, your resources, your home, your peace, or your identity. Those things still belong to you, no matter who shares your last name. I think many people struggle with this because they were raised on a very simple message. Family comes first. Sounds good. Looks great on greeting cards. Makes for excellent social media quotes. The problem is that real life is more complicated. What happens when family lies? What happens when family manipulates? What happens when family only appears when they need something? What happens when family treats your generosity like an obligation? Nobody talks about that part. Because it's uncomfortable. It's much easier to repeat slogans than to discuss reality. The reality is that healthy families operate on mutual respect. Unhealthy families often operate on guilt. There's a huge difference. One creates connection. The other creates control. I learned that difference later than I should have. And maybe that's why I wanted to share this story. Not because of my mother, not because of Simone, not because of the argument, but because I know there are people listening right now who are carrying the same weight I carried for years. The weight of trying to keep everyone happy. The weight of constantly being the reasonable one. The weight of being expected to sacrifice simply because you're capable of it. If that's you, here's something worth remembering. Your ability to carry a burden does not mean you were meant to carry it forever. Just because you can tolerate something doesn't mean you should. Just because you've survived a situation doesn't mean it's healthy. A lot of strong people confuse endurance with responsibility. I know because I did. For years. The military taught me endurance. Life taught me something else. Endurance is a skill. Boundaries are a necessity. You need both. One without the other creates problems. I also learned something unexpected from Titan. Now, before anyone points it out, I know how ridiculous it sounds to receive life lessons from a dog. Trust me, I'm aware, but hear me out. Titan never cared about appearances. He never cared about social status. He never cared about who looked important at a party. His loyalty was based entirely on trust, not convenience, not obligation. Trust. If I was having a difficult day, he stayed close. If I was fine, he relaxed. Everything was simple. Everything was honest. Sometimes I think people make relationships far more complicated than they need to be. The healthiest relationships in my life all share one thing. Nobody is keeping score. Nobody is manipulating. Nobody is demanding constant proof of loyalty. Respect flows both directions, and when respect disappears, the relationship eventually follows. Blood doesn't change that. Titles don't change that. Family trees don't change that. Only behavior does. So if I could leave you with one final thought, it would be this. Pay attention to the people who respect your boundaries. Pay attention to the people who show up when there's nothing to gain. Pay attention to the people who allow you to be fully yourself without constantly asking you to become smaller. Those people matter. Protect those relationships. Invest in them, because those are the people who become your real support system when life gets difficult. And if someone repeatedly asks you to abandon your values, your peace, your well-being, or the things that keep you standing just to make them comfortable, don't ignore what they're showing you. Believe them. The people we choose often become just as important as the people we're related to. Sometimes even more. Titan shifted slightly and pressed his head more firmly against my leg. Outside, the sunstone was beginning to set. Inside, the house was quiet, mine, peaceful, exactly the way I had worked so hard to build it. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough. If this story connected with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your boundaries? And if you enjoy stories about dignity, family dynamics, and standing up for yourself without losing who you are, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We share new stories every day at 8:30 a.m. ET and 1:30 p.m. ET, and I'd love to have you with us for the next one. Until then, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and I'll see you in the next story.